UFC 302 Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier is almost here. It goes down on June 1st, and we are going to discuss just how good is UFC 302. I'm going to go through every fight on the pay-per-view main card, briefly discuss each fight, and then at the end of the video, I am going to grade UFC 302 on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst pay-per-view ever, 10 being the greatest pay-per-view of all time, and I'm going to answer the question whether or not UFC 302 is worth your money. Before I get into any of that, take a look at the full pay-per-view main card and comment down below what grade would you give UFC 302 before you even hear my answer. So let's start off with the very first fight on the pay-per-view main card. Again, we're grading the pay-per-view. We're not grading the prelims. We're grading the pay-per-view portion of the card. Starting off with the very first fight opening up the main card is Randy Brown versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. This is actually kind of a banger. Honestly, this is kind of a banger that I think is going to get overlooked heading into UFC 302. But you have Randy Brown who's coming off that win over Muslim Salihoff. He's kind of been a guy who's been really good in the welterweight division for a while. He's lost some fights, but I mean, a loss to Jack Della Maddalena and a loss to Vicente Luque back in 2020. The Jack Della Maddalena fight was early 2023. Other than that, I mean, he has some really solid wins. They're not the elite of the elite, but you're looking at Alex Cowboy Oliveira, Jarrett Gooden, Chaos Williams, Francisco Trinaldo. They're not horrible competition. Randy Brown is kind of one of those guys who's like very, very close to being the top 15, but not quite a top 15 guy. And then you have Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, who's an absolute savage. I mean, I've been talking about this guy for a while. He is a straight up savage. He's coming off that draw with Rinat Fakhretdinov. Great fight. Before that, beat Abu Bakar. Before that, beat the dog crap out of Benoit Saint-Denis. But Saint-Denis was on short notice, and that is at welterweight, not at lightweight. Has a loss to Muslim Salihoff, but that was a while ago. Has a loss to Li Jingliang, which, isn't horrible, and that's back in 2019. I feel like both these guys could kind of make a run in the welterweight division. I'm not going to say, they're going to get to the top of the division. I mean, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos has been around for a while as a winner over Sean Strickland at welterweight, 37 years old. But overall, I think this is a great matchup stylistically. It's somewhat meaningful for the welterweight division. And overall, I think both guys are pretty high level, even though they're not ranked in the top 15. So I'm really liking this main card opener. I love this welterweight matchup. On to the next fight. We have Jailton Almeida versus Alexandr Romanov in the heavyweight division. I don't really know how to feel about this fight. Any fight with Alexandr Romanov in it, I'm really not looking forward to. Alexandr Romanov is a scrub. Absolute scrub. And I know people are going to say, how can you say that? He's in the UFC. The heavyweight division is horrible. Romanov also is hit or miss. At one point in time, I remember people were considering him a legit contender. I think it was after he dominated Chase Sherman. And he kind of came into that fight kind of looking a little bit fit. Then he loses to Marcin Tybura. Looked like shit in that fight. The fight against Alexander Volkov, he had about 30 to 45 seconds of cardio, and then he completely gassed out and got destroyed against Volkov. Then he has a shit performance against Blagoy Ivanov where he gets a win. And now, he's fighting Jailton Almeida. Jailton Almeida could have been fighting for the title. He was ragdolling Curtis Blades. Gets KO'd with those, what I like to call Travis Brown elbows. One of the first guys I've seen implement those elbows to the side of the head in the takedown situation. He's been a guy who, has been beating a lot of heavyweights, but really hasn't made that leap to contendership yet. Was kind of there, but kind of fumbled in his last fight against Curtis Blades. I guess you could consider him a contender at that point because he would have been close to a title shot had he won that fight. Maybe fighting Tom Aspinall for the belt had he not lost to Curtis Blades. But this matchup, I don't think Romanov's high level. I don't think this is a particular banger fight by any means. And I think Jailton Almeida is just going to ragdoll him most likely. And Romanov, even if he's able to put up a little bit of a defense, he's going to gas out after a minute and get ragdolled. And his skills aren't going to matter at that point because he has no gas tank. I'm sure he does. I'm pretty sure Romanov doesn't even train. Does it have a meaningful impact to the heavyweight division? Yes. If Jailton Almeida wins, I think he'll be right back in the mix, especially if he wins impressively. I see Jailton Almeida dominating in this fight. This isn't a prediction video. I'll do predictions when we get closer to UFC 302. If you're interested in my predictions, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. But this fight really doesn't do that much for me. I think Jailton Almeida it's just to get him back on the track, to have a decent contender in the heavyweight division, because the heavyweight division is absolute garbage, basically outside the top 5. That's what's going on here. Anytime Romanov's fighting, I want to turn off the fight card because it's just horrible. So let's move on to the featured fight on UFC 302, which is Kevin Holland versus Michał Oleksiejczuk. Don't get me wrong, this is a perfectly decent card, or perfectly decent fight in the middleweight division. Kevin Holland going back up the middleweight. Listen, guys. Kevin Holland gets Dana White privilege. He has no business being the featured fight on this card. He has absolutely no business being there. He gets Dana White privilege after Dana White privilege after Dana White privilege. Got the Michael Venom Page fight, Dana White privilege. Got the Jack Della Maddalena fight, Dana White privilege. Got the Michael Chiesa easy layup, Dana White privilege. Got the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight. Okay, that fight made sense. Got the Wonderboy Thompson fight on short notice, not on short notice, I'm sorry. It was Hamzat Chimaev fight with short notice, which wasn't really Dana White privilege in that case. But gets a main event against Wonderboy Thompson. Dana White privilege, was unranked, fighting like number 8. And I know the rankings don't mean anything, but that's exactly why I say the rankings don't mean anything, because look at that. Fumbles and fumbles and fumbles. Has no title aspirations. Literally, I feel like Kevin Holland, every time he shows up, he just shows up to run his mouth. And if he has a massive skill advantage, he'll get a win. But he's just collecting checks, and I just can't get behind that. So I don't really care about Kevin Holland versus Michał Oleksiejczuk. I don't think it's meaningful for the middleweight division. Kevin Holland can't grapple to save his life, even though people act like he's improved vastly. He's lost 4 out of his last 6. Every time he fights a decent fighter, he loses. I just don't care. And Michał Oleksiejczuk, don't get me wrong, I think he's a decent opponent. I don't even know who I'm picking this fight, because Holland should win this matchup probably, but I don't trust him to win any fight. I don't feel like he cares. I feel like he's just there for a check. So, featured fight on a big pay-per-view, supposedly a big pay-per-view, don't really care for this that much. It's not meaningful for the division at all, especially for the middleweight division. It means absolutely nothing. Okay, are both guys decent? Yes. Is Michał Oleksiejczuk like kind of a slugger on the feet? Sure. Kevin Holland's really good on the feet as well. So it should be an overall entertaining fight. Neither guy's like a complete scrub, but I just can't get past the barrier of thinking, you know what, Kevin Holland's just showing up for a paycheck. So don't love this fight. Don't really care for it all that much. Am I excited for it in any capacity? No, I'm not. But it's a decent fight that has no business being the featured fight on a pay-per-view at all. And it was thrown together last minute as well. A short notice fight. Unless they were just hiding it from us for a while, because they just announced it like a couple weeks ago. So not a great featured fight on UFC 302. Moving on to the co-main event. We have Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. I love this fight, and I absolutely love that the UFC has made this 5 rounds. They need to do this more often. Sean Strickland, Paulo Costa deserves to be 5 rounds. There's been more deserving fights that haven't been 5 rounds. I love this fight. I love this co-main event. I actually think this is probably the best fight on the card, to be quite honest. We're going to talk about the main event in a second. I think Sean Strickland, Paulo Costa is the best fight on the card. Sean Strickland just lost his belt against Dricus du Plessis, and it was a close fight. I thought Dricus won based on his pressure. But now, Strickland's kind of in a weird spot because he got an undeserved title shot against Adesanya, and then Adesanya's out drinking and driving beforehand. Strickland gets the win, wins the title, immediately drops the belt against Dricus du Plessis in his first title defense. Drops the belt to Dricus du Plessis. And so he's kind of in a weird spot because he was kind of in the middle of the division, but then he won the belt, but then he dropped the belt, and now it's kind of like he's I believe he's ranked number 1 right now. But it's like, it was kind of a weird spot. Who do you match him up with? Because he's fought a lot of these guys, and then depending on timing, and then people were talking about an immediate rematch against Dricus. I think the Paulo Costa fight kind of makes sense, and it's a lot of fun. Paulo Costa, I know his resume isn't that good. I know you can pick apart Paulo Costa's resume. Lost to Robert Whittaker in his last fight. Beat Luke Rockhold, but that was all the way back in 2022. Lost to Marvin Vettori. Didn't even make weight for that fight. That's 2021. Lost to Israel Adesanya. That's crazy. He's only fought 4 times since that Israel Adesanya utter destruction. But even though his resume is horrible, wins over Luke Rockhold, his only good win is Yoel Romero, and that fight was very close, and I thought actually Yoel Romero edged that out. That's crazy. That was back in 2019. It's 5 years ago. But I still think, I think Paulo Costa looked really good in the Robert Whittaker fight. Rocked Robert Whittaker at the end of the round. And I don't want to elevate Costa off of a loss, but the fact that he was very, very competitive with Whittaker in that fight, it shows me that he's still pretty good. And styles make fights. And what does Sean Strickland do every single fight? He goes into the fight, says, oh, to the death, we're going to go to war. And then he cries if someone talks about his daddy. And then he gets into the fight and he just backs up and pumps the jab and throws some teep kicks. That's all he does. What does Paulo Costa do? Some people, I feel like, have a warped, perception of Paulo Costa because he has big muscles. They think he's a KO artist. And because he has some TKOs, they think he's a KO artist. But Paulo Costa is a volume guy. He marches you down and throws lots of volume. And what gives Sean Strickland trouble? What gives him trouble? You look at Sean Strickland recently, oh, he's a win over Adesanya. You look at Paulo Costa recently, oh, he's losing to Robert Whittaker and got destroyed by Adesanya a couple years ago. You're like, oh, okay, Sean Strickland's definitely going to win. I don't think that's the case in this fight. I think this is a very close matchup where Sean Strickland's going to have to adapt here because if he lets Costa just march him down, even if Costa isn't landing, it's a lot. It's not like Strickland has a lot of high output. And if it's a close round, the optics of it is going to go to Costa because Costa's pressing forward with non-stop pressure. Cardio could become a factor. I think 5 rounds favor Sean Strickland massively. But Costa's not a guy that has been known for like crazy gassing outside of the Luke Rockhold fight, which, don't get me wrong, was a bad look, but that was at a high altitude. I just hope Costa shows up. That's my one reservation about this co-main event. I'm scared that Costa isn't going to show up. There's been some weird relationship between the UFC and Costa. It's kind of made Costa look bad, but some of it has been Costa's own doing as well. I think Costa's gotten a little bit too much flack. I believe he will show up for this fight. He cannot miss this opportunity. If he beats Sean Strickland, where's he going to end up in the rankings? And then the perception of him is going to go through the roof. And then people are going to say, oh, we want to see Paulo Costa fight for the title again. He's right in the title mix if he beats Sean Strickland. So massive fight, massive implications for the division. 2 elite of the elite in the middleweight division. And it's a stylistically fan-friendly matchup. Even though Sean Strickland's going to fight like a bitch the entire time, back up and pump the jab and throw teep kicks and not have a high output at all unless Paulo Costa completely gasses. But that's very interesting because I could see a fight where Paulo Costa wins the first 2 rounds, starts to slow down, and then Sean Strickland puts the pace on him. That's when Sean Strickland really starts to turn up the pressure and volume. So, love this matchup. I think it's the best fight on the card. Massive implications for the middleweight division. I cannot wait for Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. Moving on to the main event, we have Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier for the lightweight title. Look, guys, I'm going to be honest. I know on any given night, anybody can win a fight. Dustin Poirier can find his mythical guillotine that he tried to pull a million times against Benoit Saint-Denis. But at the end of the day, I'm in a favor of a meritocracy. And I know people can, well, what about timing and Armin turned him down and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. We're not going to get into all these different circumstances that, in my opinion, I feel like they could have been avoided. This is not like someone pulled out the week of or someone pulled out 2 weeks out and Dustin Poirier signed up to step in there. No, this is the UFC's decision-making leading them to an undeserved title shot for Dustin Poirier. And I love Dustin Poirier. I do. He does not deserve this title shot. I mean, think about how crazy this is. You go back to July of 2023, late July 2023. Justin Gaethje brutally KOs Dustin Poirier to win the BMF title. Look where their careers are right now. Dustin Poirier is fighting for a title, a legitimate title, an undisputed title, not a WWE fake belt. And Justin Gaethje just arguably took a career-altering beating against Max Holloway. And who knows where he's at. It's just the way the UFC has kind of, made and staggered some of these events. Islam wanted to fight in March, and they didn't want to make him fight in March because they had O'Malley headlining against Vera, another undeserved title shot. And I just hate that for whatever reason we're not getting Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan, which is the fight that should get made. And fair enough, Arman was offered it, but because of the way they made the fights and the timing and, how they pushed Islam back to June and they didn't want to push him back any further and there's not an event available for him for, whatever reason, they're going to London or whatnot. I just hate that this is what we end up with. And I don't think Dustin has a chance. Are these guys both high level? Yes, they're both high level. Does Dustin Poirier have a puncher's chance? Sure. Could Islam go in there laughing about the guillotine attempts of Dustin and end up underestimating it and getting guillotined? Sure, it could happen. Anything can happen in MMA, but that's not what I like to see. I like to see a fight where I'm like, damn, both these guys are super high level and they match up very well with each other, and I don't know who's going to win. I lean a certain way. I'm going to make a prediction, but oh my God, I don't know who's going to win. This is not that fight. Dustin Poirier gives up his back so easily. I mean, he just gives it up over and over and over again, just handing over his back to other grown men. Look what he did against Benoit Saint-Denis. Islam Makhachev gets him in that situation. It's over. So, honestly, while the main event on paper is two really good guys, Dustin Poirier, one of the most exciting fighters on the roster. Islam Makhachev, super exciting as well. One of the pound-for-pound best fighters. I feel like it almost is, I don't want to say it's a detriment to the card, because obviously it's the best fight on the card. It's not really the best fight on the card. Obviously it's the main event. Obviously it's the most important fight on the card. It's for the title. I just can't get behind undeserved title shots. And the fact that Dustin Poirier is 2-2 in his last 4, getting finished in 2 of them, didn't even look that great against Benoit Saint-Denis. And I know he did get the KO, but like, you have to take into account BSD did have staph infection and did gas out, but he did put the pressure, and Dustin is known for his cardio, so fair enough, he got it done. But a win over Benoit Saint-Denis isn't worth a title shot, in my opinion. Benoit Saint-Denis had a chance to prove himself, and he failed. Now, I know this is a bit hypocritical. If Benoit Saint-Denis would have just dominated Dustin Poirier in that first round, and then because of Armin and timing, Benoit Saint-Denis would have got the title shot, I'd be much more excited for this matchup. But could you imagine the amount of people that would be picking Benoit Saint-Denis? That'd be craziness. But overall, the point I'm trying to make here is, while I like both fighters' skill sets, and it's a massively important fight, it just, for me, the excitement comes from the anticipation of the fight, of thinking of all the different possibilities. And for me, it's like, okay, there's a 95% chance that Islam Makhachev subs Dustin Poirier. I can't get that excited. Dustin Poirier doesn't even deserve the opportunity. If he deserved the opportunity, okay, fair enough. It is what it is. Anything can happen. At least we can be more excited for it because he is an elite fighter and does have KO power. Just can't get all that behind the main event, even though I love both fighters. I love to watch both fighters fight. So overall, for a grade for UFC 302, unfortunately, I have to give it a low grade. I'm going to give UFC 302 a 4 out of 10. It's not as bad as some cards that we've gotten, like, looking back, UFC 297 was garbage. I think I gave that like a 2 or 3. So it's definitely substantially better than that, you know. But at the end of the day, really for me, this card is the co-main event, Strickland versus Costa. The pay-per-view opener is really solid, with Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos, and Randy Brown. I think that's pretty solid for a main card opener. And then the rest is just kind of filler. And of course, could Dustin shock the world? Sure. I just don't see that happening. But I'm giving UFC 302 a 4 out of 10. I think it's still worth buying. I think Islam Makhachev is pound for pound number 1. I don't know what the UFC official rankings and blood and sweat deems him at right now, but I think Islam Makhachev is pound for pound number 1. I think he's one of the best strikers on the roster. I think he's one of the best grapplers on the roster. I think he's the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC. Maybe neck and neck with John Jones. But I would put him above John Jones right now because John Jones has sat out for so long and has one win since 2020, basically. So I think this is a fight that you can't miss. So overall, I think it is worth the money just because, okay, you get to see Islam further his legacy, I guess. You get to see Strickland versus Costa, which should have a decent build-up as well. But overall, it's just not a great card. You get to see Jailton Almeida become a heavyweight contender again. And you get that main card opener, which should be a really good welterweight scrap. But overall, not dying to see the card. 4 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think of my grade down in the comments. Am I being too harsh on UFC 302? Let me know. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.